Subcommittee will come to order. Thank you all for joining us today. We're here to discuss 13 bills that would help veterans and their survivors navigate the VA claims and appeals process, as well as improve access to VA benefits. The bills we will discuss today would and will ensure that service members and veterans can be buried together with their family members, improve the VA appeals process, including by increasing accountability and transparency for the VA Board of Veterans Appeals, ensure there is medical research available to pave the way to compensate military pilots and aircrew for conditions due to service-related radiation and other exposures, make the VA claims process more transparent and understandable by providing veterans and their families with clear updates and instructions, ensure that VA issues accurate decisions on claims based on military sexual trauma and that MST survivors are not re-traumatized during the claims process, and require the VA to give equal attention to the needs of our nation's veterans as well as their survivors, including educating survivors who may not be aware of VA survivor benefits. I'm proud to introduce two bills on today's agenda. H.R. 2137, the Review Every Veterans Claim Act, would prevent VA from denying a veteran's VA benefit claim solely because they missed their disability claims exams. Under current law, when a veteran misses their exams without providing a good cause or rescheduling, VA automatically denies their VA disability compensation claim. Many of these veterans have pursued their VA claims for years and appeared for multiple exams. Veterans should not be forced to start their claims over because they miss one exam. This bill would stop VA's unfair practice of automatically denying those claims by ensuring that VA makes a comprehensive decision on every veteran's claims after reviewing all the evidence, including every exam each veteran has already been through. H.R. 2138, the Veterans Compensation Cost of Living Adjustment Act of 2025 would give a cost of living adjustment to veterans and survivors receiving certain VA benefits. They would receive the same increase as what Social Security recipients receive. This bill would adjust to certain VA benefits with inflation rates to help veterans and their families pay their bills and put food on the table. I would like to thank Ranking Member McGarvey for co-leading these bills with me. I look forward to working with Chairman Bosch, Ranking Member McGarvey, and other members of the subcommittee to advance these important proposals today. I thank the witnesses who are here and have joined us and look forward to discussing how these bills would improve the lives of veterans and their families. I now yield to the Ranking Member for his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your leadership in today's committee hearing. I'm honored to be sponsoring a lot of those bills with you that are going to make a difference in our veterans' lives. I think in this committee, we are fortunate. We're fortunate that our guiding light is not partisan or party. It is a veteran-centered committee, a veteran-centered approach, where veteran-centered policy is not right or left. We deal more with right and wrong. It's a deep thing that we held in this. It's a belief that we are here based on a commitment to those who stand for something greater than themselves, for the men and women who are willing to put on a uniform and quite literally sacrifice everything to keep us safe and free. We must do what we can to honor their service and give them the benefits they have earned. I want to highlight a few bills, starting with the Veterans Claims Education Act by my colleague, Mr. Peters. This bill is a worthy measure to stop claim sharks from taking advantage of our service members and their families. It's a topic that we know is important as we repeatedly hear calls of don't feed the sharks. Our veterans aren't chum, and they can't be treated like they are. And this committee will not be complicit in the exploitation of veterans, so I support all the efforts to provide them with the information they need to make the best decision for their claims preparation. Ranking Member Takano's Survivor Benefits Delivery Improvement Act seeks to capture important information regarding veterans surviving spouses, children, and parents to ensure we are serving all who earned their benefits, not just some. Currently, as a direct result of the VA not dedicating sufficient staff and attention to the task, these benefits go underutilized. Recent DOJ cuts have decreased the 4-person team working on this down to 3. Luckily, the employee was reinstated, but you can do the math pretty quickly and understand that 3 employees is insufficient to manage a nationwide program of survivors. Finally, I want to highlight my bipartisan bill, the Board of Veterans Appeals Attorney Retention and Backlog Act. I honestly wish we'd come up with a better title for that because it does really important work. This will help cut down the egregious amount of time veterans have to wait for their appeals to be reviewed. The bill is going to broaden the Board of Veterans Appeals workforce by attracting highly skilled, educated, and effective attorneys to dig through the backlog and get our veterans these claims decisions in a timely manner. To attract and retain the best talent, the bill creates a GS-15 position for the best VVA attorneys. It doesn't matter how many attorneys we hire if they burn out and leave before a claim has been adjudicated. That level of turnover we're seeing right now is not efficient. It's not good for our veterans. Right now, it is clear that the Board of Veterans' Appeals is not able to serve our veterans adequately. Appeal times are in excess right now of like 2 years. This is unacceptable. And here's the truth. The only way out is through. This is a problem that will not go away if we simply ignore it. If we do ignore it, the backlog will continue to grow. It'll continue to frustrate veterans and placing BVA employees in an impossible situation where they simply cannot work every claim because there are not enough people to do the work and get them completed. So we must employ and retain more attorneys to get to the bottom of the pile and dig the VA out of the hole it is in. Let me be clear. This is not to say the VA doesn't serve our veterans, doesn't care about the process. That's far from the truth. This bill, though, does highlight the need to retain more skilled and professional employees at the VA to take care of these claims. We cannot expect things to get better for our veterans while we take the chainsaw to the very administration that is tasked with funding the benefits to them. Mr. Peters, Mr. Takano, and I have proposed bills which have broad support in the veteran community, but to deliver on those bills, we must fight for a stable institution. We cannot attract quality professionals willing to serve if they are joining an organization that injects uncertainty into every aspect of their life. Let's staff at the appropriate levels, pay grades to provide veterans and their families what they have earned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to member testimony, we've got a very full agenda today, so I'll be holding everyone to 3 minutes per bill so that we can get through them all. This morning, we are joined by several of our colleagues, both on and off the committee, who are going to be testifying about the bills they have sponsored. Representative Self, sir, you're recognized for 3 minutes to speak on your bill.
Thank you, Chairman, for holding this hearing. I share Ranking Member McGarvey's concerns with the appeals process. I'm going to discuss one of my 2 bills that will deal with the appeals process today. H.R. 1741, the Veterans Appeals Transparency Act. This bill is a crucial step toward restoring transparency to the VA Board of Veterans Appeals process. Veterans have 3 docket options when filing an appeal. The board tells veterans that the average time to receive a decision on their appeal on the FAST board docket is 1 year. But as of October 2024, even veterans who chose the fastest board docket, the direct review docket, are waiting an average of 1.5 years to receive a decision on their appeal. And there are veterans in the fastest board docket who have been waiting over 5 years to receive a decision on their appeal. It is clear to me that the average wait times that the board tells veterans and Congress are misleading. These averages provide veterans and their advocates with no accurate sense of where they are in line. The board must do better to provide veterans with realistic expectations for how long they will have to wait for a decision. My bill will do just that. The Veterans Appeals Transparency Act would require the board to publish weekly updates on its website about which appeals they are working on in each board docket. This will ensure greater transparency from the board for our veterans as well as for Congress. Additionally, my bill requires the board's weekly updates to include a statement clarifying that these weekly updates do not mean a decision will be made that week. This will prevent veterans from mistakenly believing that a decision is imminent. Our veterans deserve clarity and transparency in the appeals process. My bill will help to ensure exactly that. Again, I'd like to thank the chairman for his support and Ranking Member McGarvey for his concern on this process. We need to fix it, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Self. Ms. Kim, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Luttrell and Ranking Member McGarvey for hosting us and holding this very important legislative hearing today. I am really excited to see H.R. 2201, the Improving VA Training for Military Sexual Trauma Claims Act, that is on the docket and being discussed in today's hearing. Approximately 1 in 3 women and 1 in 50 men experience military sexual trauma, or MST, as a service member. Currently, the VA must help veterans filing disability benefits claims for MST gather evidence for their claims. Unfortunately, VA claims processors and examiners often do not have the sufficient training to recognize those indirect markers of MST, or to avoid forcing victims to relieve their trauma. In fact, disability compensation examiners are only required to complete an outdated online sensitivity training once every 5 years. Filing these claims is burdensome enough. The examination process shouldn't cause more pain. The Bipartisan Improving VA Training for Military Sexual Trauma Act would require all VA employees involved with MST claims to complete annual training to identify evidence of MST claims and annual sensitivity training to avoid re-traumatizing those victims. Additionally, to ensure victims' cases are processed in a timely manner, the VA would be required to automatically obtain all service personnel medical records for a service member filing an MST disability claim. The VA Secretary would also submit both an annual report to Congress on the progress of the MST sensitivity training program and a detailed plan to improve it. HR 2201 is a common sense, bipartisan measure that ensures VA staff are prepared to provide veterans with the support and protection they deserve. Streamlining the MST claim process and improving VA training is a win for our veterans. So I want to thank the committee for considering HR 2201 and Representatives Baczynski, Houlihan, and Bacon for co-leading this bipartisan bill with me. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Mr. Pfluger, sir, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member. I'm not on this committee, but this is my top priority in Congress. This bill that I'm about to talk about is my #1 priority, and I appreciate the opportunity. Military aviators and crew members are tragically being diagnosed with various forms of cancer at alarming rates, which is why I'm proud to lead HR 530, the Aviator Cancers Examination Study, also known as the ACES Act. The ACES Act directs the VA to partner with the National Academies of Science to study cancer prevalence among military aviators and identify service-connected factors, ultimately saving lives through earlier detection, developing targeted screening protocols, and ensuring our veterans receive the specialized care they've earned. This is critical because in 2021, an Air Force cancer incidence study revealed troubling findings about the health risks faced by fighter pilots and their crews. When compared to the general population, it shows aircrew had a 29% greater probability of testicular cancer, a 24% higher probability for melanoma, and 23% higher rate of prostate cancer. Additionally, the DoD's Military Aviator Cancer Study also found elevated rates of cancer among military aviators and aviation ground personnel. And I understand that there's potential duplication concerns. These are not true. Let me clarify. The ACES Act is complementary. It's not duplicative. It leverages the National Academy's expertise in meeting the VA's evidentiary requirements for determining service connections and includes veterans who might not qualify under the PACT Act. Through more comprehensive and focused research on this issue than the aforementioned studies, the ACES Act will help us develop tailored interventions, improve screening protocols, and provide better care for aviators affected by cancer. This is not a partisan issue. Over 20 veterans, cancer, and medical professional organizations have rallied behind this bill because they're tired of waiting year after year while aviators continue to suffer. They demand action now. Moving this legislation forward isn't just about providing critical care, it's about finally acknowledging the true cost of service that these aviators have paid and continue to pay daily. Myself, as an aviator, a fighter pilot with over 20 years of service, I have witnessed firsthand the incredible dedication, bravery, and resilience of our nation's aviators. But I've also seen many of my brothers and sisters affected by this, and their toughest battles actually weren't in the air. Unfortunately, they're in hospital rooms as they fight cancer. That's why I'm honored to invite my dear friend, Colonel Annie Pablo Shurtleff, who will testify with us today. You need to hear his story, his fight against non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The ACES Act is not just a bill. It's a lifeline for those who have already given and continue to give so much for our freedom. We owe it to them. They were wingmen for our country. They provided the service to fight for our country, for the freedoms, and now is the time to do the right thing and be their wingmen and provide the service and find the causal factors for what they're going through in the battles that they're currently fighting. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Pfluger. Mr. Bresnahan, you're recognized for 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ranking Member McGarvey, appreciate you having me. I'd like to open by thanking the committee for taking interest in my bill, the Simplifying Forms for Veterans Claims Act, and inviting me to come speak on it today with you. Our veterans must complete VA standard forms to initiate and pursue their claims for VA benefits. These forms include those filled out by surviving spouse or other family members following the passing of their veteran loved one. These are the benefits our veterans and their dependents have earned, yet these forms are often difficult to understand and complete. Understandably, the complexity of these forms can be overwhelming for the veteran's grieving family. There is no reason for veterans or their survivors to be subjected to a process more difficult than necessary when these forms can be improved, making them user-friendly. This bill would require the VA to contract with a nonpartisan, federally funded research entity to conduct a study on and provide recommendations for revising VA forms to be more understandable for veterans and their survivors. The research entity would collaborate with the VA and the veterans and survivors advocates and require the VA secretary to report the findings to Congress and implement the recommendations that are compliant with VA law. The Simplifying Forms for Veteran Claims Act is common sense, bipartisan legislation that would ensure veterans are able to complete VA forms correctly without unneeded stress so they can receive fair and timely decisions on their claims for VA benefits. I look forward to continuing to work with the committee to get this legislation signed into law, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bresnahan. Mr. Barrett, sir, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you and the committee's attention to this bill, the bill that I sponsored, and the opportunity to testify on the importance of my bill, H.R. 1039, the Clear Communication for Veterans Claims Act. I'm proud to lead this bipartisan legislation with Chairman Bost and Representative Baczynski. A priority of mine is to ensure that veterans understand how to access the benefits that they've earned, and this bill will do just that. After a veteran files a disability claim, the VA sends letters throughout the claims process. These notice letters are critical to ensuring that veterans understand how to pursue their claims and receive the VA benefits that they've rightfully earned through their service. I've too often heard from my constituents and other veterans across Michigan and across our country that these claims letters are difficult to understand. They're filled with legal jargon. Many times they are automated from computer systems that are antiquated and outdated, and they can be upwards of 40 pages long, making it extremely challenging to distill out from that exactly what the response and required information is. This can discourage veterans and their surviving family members from pursuing their claims and receiving benefits. And far too often, we've heard stories of veterans who have given up their claim because the process becomes bureaucratically difficult to navigate. Our veterans and their families deserve better, and that's why I sponsored this legislation. These letters should be shorter, clearer, and more easily communicating for the veterans and their survivors. It shouldn't take a lawyer to explain to them what a letter says. My bill would require the VA to contract with a third-party research entity outside of the VA to really review these notice letters to make them more understandable for veterans and their families. The men and women who serve in our military deserve a claims process that's simple and clear, not confusing and stressful. I know firsthand, just in my own interaction with the VA, the confusion that can follow when you file a particular claim. You get a letter automated back in the mail. You don't know if it is requiring you to furnish further information, if this is adjudicating a claim that you've put in, if it's summarizing what you've done so far. It can be very confusing to follow along in the next steps. So I'm proud the first bill that I introduced into Congress is this bill, which will help ensure veterans receive the support that they deserve. I'm grateful to Chairman Bost and Congresswoman Baczynski's support, and Mr. Chairman, appreciate you taking up this bill and look forward to our committee leading on this important issue, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. We will forego a round of questioning for the members. Any questions may be submitted for the record. You are now excused, although I understand some of the members may be staying to ask questions during the next panel. I now invite the second panel to take the table. In accordance with committee rules, I ask unanimous consent that the following members be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearings. Representative Kim from California, Representative Pfluger from Texas, Mr. Yocum from Indiana, Mr. Barrett from Michigan, and Mr. Bresnahan from Pennsylvania. Without objection, so ordered. Is everyone ready and well rested? That's rhetorical, you don't have to answer it. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for all of those that traveled to get here. Our second panel includes Ms. Patricia Krisfalusy. Apologies, Krisfalusy Maxon. The sister of Master Sergeant Dennis Krisfalusy. Where am I at? Stand by. I now yield to Representative Pfluger to introduce our next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It really is an honor to introduce my friend, Colonel Andrew J. Shurtleff, but he's known to me as Pablo. And I've known Andy for over 20 years. He's an exceptionally distinguished and accomplished Air Force veteran, fighter pilot, leader, husband to Julie, who is also here, and father. He has flown over 1,500 hours. The accomplishments are too numerous to list. We would be here, and I fear that you would gavel me out if I were to talk about all the accomplishments that Colonel Shurtleff has done throughout his career. But probably the most important one is that when there was a task given, when there was an assignment to be had, when there was any sort of activity that needed to be done, he was the first person to raise his hand, he was the first person to volunteer, he was the first person to lead. And as a squadron commander and someone who served in many different roles, he was the most trusted individual that I've served with. But he's fighting the biggest fight of his life right now against cancer, and that's why we're here today. Andy, I want to thank you for your courage. As I mentioned, you were a wingman to all of us at every moment throughout our active duty career, and it's time for us to be a wingman to you. Thank you for the courage. Thank you for standing up, not just for you, but for so many of our friends that we know who have fought the same battles that you're going through. And I want to sincerely thank you for being here and thank your family for allowing you to be here as well. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Pfluger. And Colonel, thank you for your service and your family's service. Mr. Pfluger speaks highly of you, and I hold him in the highest regard. So you must be one amazing human being, which is a Navy guy that's very challenging for me to say to you. Next on the panel is Ms. Diane Boyd-Rauber. Good to see you again, as always. Executive Director of National Organization of Veterans Advocates, and Ms. Leslie Witter, Senior Vice President of Advocacy at the National Funeral Directors Association. Would all the witnesses please stand and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you, and let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. Ms. Krisfalusy Maxon, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to present your testimony.
Thank you for having me today. I greatly appreciate your help for the veterans. I am here for my brother, Dennis Krisfalusy. My brother was raised in a small town in western Pennsylvania. We were blessed to have wonderful parents and siblings, Chuck, Cindy, and Lisa. My brother graduated from California Area High School, class of 1961. We were very proud when he made the decision to join the military, as my father served in World War II in the Army. My brother Denny's smile lit up the room. His kindness is memorable, from bringing home stray animals and people, helping neighbors and friends, and creating a famous ball game called Rubber Hose. My brother was physically fit. He jogged, he lifted weights, and he ate very healthy. Recently, a friend remarked, "Your brother was so kind, but you knew better than to mess with him." Being around my brother was joyous, filled with warmth, love, and pranks. The day he left for basic training, it was filled with tears and sadness. When he came home, it was a holiday. My mother always made his favorite ethnic foods, and the house was filled with family and relatives. He was stationed at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. He went to a dance one evening, came home, and immediately called my mother to tell her that he met a beautiful, kind girl, and her name was Lois. They were married in June 19 1965. He immediately was bonded with her family and her sisters, and they welcomed him into the family as we welcomed her. They enjoyed traveling, their dog, family, and friends. While they were stationed in Germany, they got to travel Europe. Denny served a tour of duty in Vietnam. We were always concerned about his safety, and Lois remained loyal and his very best friend. This time seemed to make them bond a little closer. They built a house in Arizona. They completed 20 years of service. Denny became a mail carrier, went to LA. In September of 1985, they made a decision to go to Mexico to find a retirement home. The year before he made that decision, my mother passed away suddenly. He came home to Pennsylvania, discussed with us if something ever happened to Lois, he would not want to live. At the time they traveled, they always sent postcards home to our family. My grandmother received a postcard from Mexico City. She realized that my brother and sister-in-law were there during the earthquake, an 8.1 magnitude earthquake that killed 10,000 people. September 19th, 1985, 7:19 a.m. in the morning. This occurred before there was computers, cell phones, internets. Communication was impossible due to the devastation. We made contact with my brother's co-workers and friends in LA and realized that my brother did not return to work, that he was lost in the earthquake. We immediately contacted our family friend, Congressman Murphy, John Hines, the Veterans Administration, and Red Cross to help us. We were informed that the concern was for the living and they had to bury the dead. If my brother was alive, they assured us that they would notify us. I asked about going to Mexico. I was told that there would be devastation beyond my belief. We did not go to Mexico. We trusted that we were being led the right way. The day that my brother died, and we found out he did not make it, was the day my father died. We buried my father in 2006. Lois's mother waited for her to come home till the day she died. In 2023, we decided to finally honor Denny in the cemetery of the Alleghenies in Washington County. I contacted the cemetery, we worked with the veterans, we planned a beautiful ceremony. We were told, after everything was planned, that Lois's name could not be permitted on the stone because of the time of her death. I worked very closely with the Veterans Administration, Congressman Rothenschild's office, Senator Fetterman's office, to see if we can make a change. What I must tell you, that I was treated so fairly, with empathetic and respect. I was impressed with the constant communication of everyone that was involved in the situation. What we are asking for today is that we hope we can continue to collaborate on changing the current law, which prevents spouses of veterans like our Lois, who died before 1998, from being honored by passing the Dennis and Lois Krisfalusy Act to ensure no veteran spouse is forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Colonel, you're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Well, good morning, Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member McGarvey, and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to address you this morning, and it's quite an honor to represent all active duty and veteran military aircrew members on the topic of the ACES Act, HR 530. HR 530. I'm joined this morning by my wife, Julie, who is sitting behind me in the gallery and supports me each and every day. I retired from the United States Air Force in December of 2022 after another nearly 23 years of service to our nation. I was trained as a fighter pilot in the F-15C and the F-22, culminating in approximately 1,500 total flight hours while flying operational missions and training the next generation of fighter pilots. And I had a promising career, handpicked to stand up the sole F-22 flying unit early promotion to lieutenant colonel, top marks as a squadron commander, and distinguished graduate from senior developmental education. In 2018, while serving at Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, I was looking forward to the next challenge, promotion to colonel, a flying 06 command tour, and endless future possibilities. I was also in the best shape of my life, training for my first half Ironman. Simply, I was on top of the world. And that world came crashing down on January 8th, 2019, when I received a call from my doctor saying I had cancer. Scans revealed I had a fist-sized tumor growing on my left kidney. Additional tests revealed that the cancer had already spread to both of my lungs. I was 41 years old, married with a 10 and 13-year-old sons at home, and I had stage 4 cancer. While I was selected for promotion to 06 a few weeks after my diagnosis, I was also permanently grounded and eventually medically disqualified from aviation service. My promising flying career was over. Scheduling and attending doctor appointments became a near full-time job for the next several months, and in the last 6 years, I've undergone 2 surgeries, multiple procedures, 3 rounds of radiation treatment, untold number of scans and blood draws. I participated in a clinical trial, and quite frankly, I've exhausted all known treatment options. In June of 2019, following my partial lung resection surgery, I woke with a half-inch tube protruding from my back attached to a vacuum that was designed to suck out additional fluid from my chest cavity. My friend and fellow fighter pilot, August Fodo Pfluger, now Congressman Pfluger, came to visit me in the hospital and slowly walked the halls with me while he carried that vacuum. It is something I will never forget. The last 6 years have been an emotional roller coaster for me and my family, and I still remain in the fight for my life today. I would say it's natural for people to question the need for the ACES Act when the PACT Act was just enacted in 2022. The PACT Act is a great piece of legislation that expands VA health care and benefits for veterans exposed to burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxic substances. The act removes the burden from the veteran of having to prove service connection for certain medical conditions. And while the PACT Act will likely help millions of veterans and their families, it is also limited to certain time periods and specific locations. To be clear, the PACT Act does not cover aviators like me and thousands of others who have been proven to have significantly elevated cancer diagnoses and deaths simply from doing their daily flying duties, as documented in 3 studies from 2021 to 2024. In a way, I was lucky, though, because my cancer was diagnosed while I was on active duty and was therefore automatically service-connected. And as such, I do receive VA health care and benefits for my condition. But there are an untold number of veterans who are not so lucky, whose cancer is diagnosed after their military service, and therefore they do not receive those benefits. The purpose of the ACES Act is to right this wrong by identifying the hazards in the military aviation operating environment that more likely than not cause cancer. We must identify the root cause affecting otherwise healthy aircrew. The health and continued service of our military aircrew directly impacts national security and should be prioritized appropriately. The United States needs to address the health risks posed to military aircrew by their unique work environment, by dedicating the resources to fully investigate, understand, and eventually mitigate those risks. That is why the ACES Act is needed. Thank you again for this opportunity to address a subcommittee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Colonel. Ms. Robert, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member McGarvey, and members of the subcommittee. On behalf of NOVA, thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback on the bills before you today. NOVA members are accredited attorneys and agents who represent veterans, family members, survivors, and caregivers in their VA disability claims and appeals. Therefore, our testimony today focuses on those bills designed to improve the adjudication process. NOVA supports H.R. 1039, Clear Communications for Veterans Act, Claims Act, and H.R. 1286, Simplifying Forms for Veterans Claims Act. These bills would create centers to assess VA letters and forms and would include critical input from advocates. We testified in March 2024 regarding VA letters and participated in the discussions led by this subcommittee on ways to improve them. Given the vast number of letters VA drafts and sends on a daily basis, this work needs to be ongoing. Likewise, we have long advocated for simpler and clearer forms. While we support H.R. 1286, NOVA and other veterans organizations have sought greater flexibility from VA when accepting forms from veterans. We previously testified about the problem of VA rejecting a wrong form submitted by a veteran and asking for a different form, even when it can be determined from the first form what benefit the veteran is seeking. Last Congress, Chairman Bost introduced legislation that would require VA to accept an incorrect form as an intent to file under 38 CFR 3.155. We urge the subcommittee to consider strengthening this bill with a similar provision as detailed in our written statement. NOVA supports the Review Every Veteran's Claim Act. This bill would prohibit VA from denying a claim solely because the veteran does not appear for a medical examination. NOVA members frequently report instances where a veteran communicates an inability to attend an exam for a host of reasons: conflict with work schedules, illness or mobility issues, family responsibilities, or a lack of transportation. Sometimes they are unable to reach someone to reschedule, sometimes that request is not honored, and sometimes they never receive notice of the exam in the first place. This bill reflects a more veteran-centric policy. We expect it will also result in more scrutiny of a file to determine if the claim can be granted based on ongoing VA treatment or private medical evidence already of record, as required under 38 U.S.C. Section 5125. NOVA supports the Improving Training for Military Sexual Trauma Claims Act. This bill builds on successful bipartisan efforts of past Congresses to improve adjudication of these claims. We support all efforts to ensure veterans who make a claim for a condition based on military sexual trauma are not re-traumatized. In particular, given that contract examiners handle most VA disability exams, training for healthcare professionals and those who communicate with veterans to schedule these exams is very important. NOVA supports the Veterans Appeals Transparency Act, which would require the board to provide weekly notice of the assignment of certain docket dates to VLJs for consideration. With the passage of the Appeals Modernization Act, claimants were provided with more choice and control over the course of their appeals. The Board of Veterans' Appeals now operates 3 dockets: direct review, evidence, and hearing. On its website, the board notes that it is finally deciding far more cases in the new AMA system than the legacy system. However, it also notes that as of December 2025, average days pending for a decision in the direct review docket is 506 days, with 713 and 791 days respectively for the evidence and hearing dockets. Therefore, this is a good time for more transparency for veterans on where their case is in the process, as well as to help veterans and their advocates make informed decisions on how to proceed with current and future appeals. We also support the Board of Veterans' Appeals Attorney Retention and Backlog Reduction Act. This bill would allow for non-supervisory attorneys employed by the board to achieve promotion to a grade GS-15. NOVA maintains that individuals with appeals pending at the board are best served by decision-writing attorneys who are experienced and knowledgeable about the ever-changing field of veterans law. Someone who has stayed at the board and produced quality work to be eligible for this grade, but who chooses not to become a supervisor, should not be penalized. Finally, NOVA supports the Veterans Claims Education Act. This bill would provide veterans, family members, survivors, and caregivers with information to help them understand and select accredited representation if they seek assistance with their claims. Given the ongoing problem with unaccredited claims consultants, this information can save claimants from receiving potentially incorrect and costly information from unaccredited actors. Thank you again for the opportunity today, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Ms. Witter, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member McGarvey, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. On behalf of nearly 20,000 licensed funeral directors and embalmers from across the nation who are members of NFDA, the National Funeral Directors Association, I'm Leslie Witter and I'm the Senior Vice President of NFDA. The role of funeral directors in ensuring that veterans receive a dignified funeral and burial cannot be overstated. the vital collaboration between funeral directors, Congress, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and the Department of Defense is crucial in supporting bereaved veteran families during their time of profound grief and loss. Mr. Chairman, NFDA supports H.R. 647, which is common sense legislation that would allow families to inter their veteran loved ones in a VA National Cemetery, even if they had previously opted for the urn or plaque benefit, thus ensuring that families have flexibility to make the best decision for their loved one's final resting place. This legislation provides a thoughtful solution to a problem that adds unnecessary stress and grief to veteran families. I would like to thank Representative Yakum for his efforts to address this nuanced but incredibly important issue, and NFDA encourages passage of this legislation. I'm also honored to speak today in support of H.R. 1344, the Dennis and Lois Krisfalusy Act. I want to thank Representative Roshan Tyler for his efforts to ensure that no veteran or family member is denied the recognition they rightfully deserve for their service to our nation. H.R. 1344 corrects an injustice by addressing an arbitrary and outdated restriction that prohibits the VA from providing a memorial headstone or marker for military spouses and dependent children who passed away on or after November 11th, 1998, and ensures that military families are properly honored together. By fixing this injustice, we're ensuring that families like the Krisfalusy family can be laid to rest together and memorialized with dignity, and NFDA encourages passage of this legislation. Mr. Chairman, in preparation for today's testimony, I spoke with funeral directors who assist grieving families as they navigate their way through the sometimes complicated process of applying for benefits from multiple agencies within the VA. The Office of Survivor Assistance is a crucial resource overseeing all benefits and services furnished by the VA to survivors and dependents of deceased veterans. So recently, the Office of Survivor Assistance was moved out of the Office of the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and that this hampers OSA's ability to serve as the principal advisor to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. And that impacts survivor families. So NFDA believes that there should be no barrier between the Office of Survivors Assistance and the Office of the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. And for this reason, we support H.R. 1228 and encourage passage of this legislation. Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member McGarvey, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the National Funeral Directors Association, I want to thank you for your tireless leadership, dedication, and diligent work in support of our nation's veterans and their families. In closing, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to testify before you today on behalf of Funeral Service and NFDA, and affirm our unwavering commitment to honoring our nation's veterans and their families. I hope that my testimony has provided valuable insights, and I am happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Witter. The written statements of our witnesses today will be entered into the hearing record. We will now begin questioning. I recognize the ranking member. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Colonel Shirley, thank you so much for your service. We're gratefully appreciative of it for it, and I just want to thank you again for your continued service and being here today to help all the aviators who come afterwards. To your family, I hope you know we'll say a prayer for you tonight. Appreciate you being here. I want to ask some questions of Ms. Boyd-Robert this morning, and that we know the Board of Veterans Appeals is already facing a lot of delays. Veterans are literally waiting years for their claims and their cases to be heard. So keeping the attorneys who are reviewing these claims should be a priority. But instead, it seems like the BVA is making decisions that push people away, like limiting promotions, enforcing return to office rules that don't make sense. We're trying to fix these, even if just a little, so our veterans can get their claims in a timely manner. Since your members regularly work with the Board of Veterans Appeals as accredited attorneys, how crucial do you think it is for board attorneys to be skilled and knowledgeable in their roles?
It is absolutely vital. Those attorneys are more or less the front line in reviewing a veteran's claim and assisting the VLJ that they are assigned to. Some veterans' claims files can be thousands of pages long. So that attorney is tasked with digging through the files, selecting and understanding what the most important evidence is in the record, and putting together a draft decision that the VLJ can then review. So again, they are really sort of the critical first line, and it's absolutely understandable that they have to have a very high level of skill and knowledge to do the job.
And so we want the VA to have and use whatever tools it needs to attract the best and brightest attorneys it can find and to incentivize them to stay there so they get that knowledge base and can actually review these claims more efficiently.
Absolutely.
Great. Do you think that arbitrarily capping the promotion potential of board attorneys is a good thing or a bad thing in getting the best and brightest to stay and review these claims more efficiently?
Well, we don't think it's a good thing. We think that they should have the opportunities to advance, and that, those most skilled attorneys that choose to stay and actually make it their career are the folks that are there to help some of the other newer people as well who are coming in. And I did note that was something that AFG talked about in their written statement. And so they are actually, really contributing to the life and the culture at the board, and that's important.
I appreciate that. I also want to ask you about another issue that we've dealt with frequently in the subcommittee since I've been here, at least, and that's claim sharks. The unscrupulous actors, some of the illegal companies that are taking hundreds of millions of dollars from our veterans every year under the guise of helping them process these claims. And look, I know veterans are frustrated. We have to do a better job of making these claims easier to navigate. We also have to understand that they need options. I believe they do. There are thousands of companies that are accredited and that those representatives are ready to help. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of informing veterans of the legal accredited options available to them, and how would Representative Peters' bill help with that?
Well, we maintain that more information is always good for veterans, and that when people are making a decision about whether or not they want to do a claim on their own or seek assistance with the claim, we feel that it's critically important that a veteran understand that there are accredited veteran service organizations, there are accredited attorneys, and there are accredited agents, and we really support anything that will help veterans, caregivers, survivors, family members be more informed about who's going to be assisting them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Pfluger, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'd like to thank my friend Andy Pablo Shurtleff for being here and for sharing your testimony, as well as all the other witnesses for your time today. Today, we have 3 peer-reviewed aviator cancer studies that have occurred in the last 4 years, and their findings are in full agreement. Veteran flyers in all fixed-wing seats, fleets, ranks, roles share in significantly elevated rates of cancer. So what do we do next? And that's the reason that we're here exploring the ACEs Act. Common sense tells us that we need to ask what is causing the cancer. And there's no other study underway or planned except for the ACEs Act that can help our veterans with the why of their cancers. And we certainly will not obtain this information from another cancer incidence study that reconfirms the high rates of cancer. We know that. Now it's about the why, it's about the what, what's causing it. And what I want to talk about is the cost of inaction if we don't do something. And if we pivot away from getting to the cause of these cancers, we're in fact telling our veteran flyers, you're on your own. And furthermore, we're not going to help you figure it out. We're not going to help you figure out what made you sick. And it's my friend Pablo and others that we both know, that we have served with, that we flew with, that suffer. So my first question for you, Pablo, is tell us about your journey and what would have been different had we had the ACEs Act already, and how would your journey have differed?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman Pfluger. I'll answer that in a couple different ways. Right now we're hanging out our veterans and our active duty aircrew members to dry a bit. We've identified that they are sicker than the human population, or the U.S. population that they're pulled from. At a micro scale, my son is a freshman in college. He already has his private pilot's license. He's a passionate aviator, and he's already considering going into the Air Force to be a fighter pilot. I don't know if I can back him up on that right now. I have concerns for that. When you expand that out now across all the different veterans organizations that are backing the ACEs Act, That's a lot of America's military families that are questioning whether or not they should send their sons or daughters into America's cockpits right now, because cancer is not a fun thing. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And so we do need to figure out the what and the why behind it so that we can mitigate that. And so we can put clear, definable, measurable instruments into place to mitigate those risks, to protect our aviators, and that way they can continue to do our nation's business.
What a great point, and when we think about it from the family members of those who have children that want to go serve, are we prepared? Do we believe that our country is doing everything they can? And I want to say thank you to the VA in advance. I know they're going to testify here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for this opportunity. What words of advice do you have to the VA? I think they try to do their best every single day, but now we have knowledge and we must act. What words would you have for the VA specifically?
Yeah, I think we need to act, and we need to act in a timely manner. As you mentioned earlier, and I said in my own testimony, we have very clear evidence at this point of the incidents. We recognize that people who are pulled from the U.S. population, these are not people that walk right off the street. These are highly screened medically, physically, before they join the military. If you become a military aviator, you go through additional screening. I personally went through an entire day of being poked and prodded in every way, shape, and form before I even began my flying career. So I was a healthy, incredibly healthy individual when I entered at 22 years old, and less than 20 years later, I had stage 4 cancer. So there's something wrong there, so we need to act. And we know there's something going on, we just need to figure out what that is. And again, that's why we need to work together between the National Academy of Sciences, who's being directed to conduct this study, work with the VA on the study, and then report back to the appropriate agencies on what actions we need to take.
This is anecdotal, and not to put you on the spot with math in public, but both of us know many of our friends that have gone through these battles. I mean, any estimate or idea of how many friends that we both know that you've served with that have gone through cancer at a very early age in their lives?
I know of dozens. I personally know probably around a dozen individuals who have gone through cancer, some who are with us today, some who are not with us today. And when I think about it on the civilian side or outside the military air crew population, for those who are under, say, 50 years old, I know two. I know two people, and one was a baby. So the statistics are there, and it's very, very personal to me. I lost a squadron commander who died of cancer just a few years ago. And every once in a while, I'll get a phone call, say, hey, Pablo, I just found out I have cancer. What do I do? So it is very, very personal, and it happens day in and day out.
Thank you for testifying, for your courage, for the fight that you're going through right now, and for being here today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fiedler. Dr. Morrison, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to our witnesses for being here today to testify about the legislation before us today. I want to begin by thanking the chair and ranking member for their leadership on providing a cost of living adjustment for our veterans. Our veterans have earned these benefits, and it's critical that we pass this legislation to allow them to keep pace with inflation. Ms. Boyd-Raubart, I'd like to begin with you. As you know, the rate of claims for military sexual trauma has increased significantly in recent years, up 18% from last year, up 40% from a decade ago. I'm grateful to my colleagues, Representatives Kim and Budzinski, for introducing bipartisan legislation to better train the VBA workforce to handle these highly sensitive claims. Can you speak to the importance of having VA and contract examiners who are well prepared to manage claims for veterans who may have experienced MST?
Sure. As we noted in our testimony, we think it's just really critical that people who are filing these claims are not re-traumatized, and that they're not made to tell their story over and over again to different people, and that the people who are processing the claims and the medical examiners who are going to be examining them and speaking to them have the sensitivity training to understand how to move forward with those exams. And honestly, we think it's important generally because even if the claim is not specifically about MST, there could be some other things in the claims process that is somehow related to that, then it's important for them to have that kind of sensitivity training and be attuned to the experiences that some of these folks have had.
Thank you. Colonel Shurtleff, thank you for your service, for your sacrifice, and for being here with us today. I'm so sorry to learn of your diagnosis, but I'm heartened by your resolve and of working with your friend and my colleague, Representative Pfluger, on the ACES Act. Both of my grandfathers were pilots in World War II, and I have tremendous respect and admiration for aviators and recognize the unique risks that you face in your military service. You and Representative Pfluger got into this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more your perspective on how additional research into cancer rates among aviators and aircrew could help identify some of the unique health risks associated with flying, and also how would you suggest making such research complementary to ongoing initiatives at VA and DoD?
I think it's incredibly important to identify the what and the why that's causing the cancer. The sooner we do that, the better. We've spent since 2021 proving time and time again that there is a higher incident rate among our aircrew. It's funny, when Congressman Pfluger and I learned to fly and throughout our flying career, we were always taught to maneuver our aircraft in relation to the threat. Understand your threat environment and mitigate those threats as best you could to accomplish your mission. We talked about surface-to-air missiles, enemy aircraft, air-to-air missiles, and things like that. We never talked about what could be happening within our own cockpits, within our own aircraft, that could be making us sick. And so the quicker we understand and can clearly identify what those threats are within our own cockpit, within our own operating environment that is unique to military aviation, the quicker that we can protect our aircrew, regain the faith of our aircrew in our government, and allow them to continue to serve the way they want to defend our nation.
Thank you. You know, your comments about your son hit me particularly hard. My husband's an Army combat veteran. He comes from a long tradition of military service, as many military families do, and continue that tradition. And I think your hesitation about encouraging your son speaks volumes, and we need to listen to that. I wish you and your family all the best. My prayers to you, and thank you for your testimony. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. General, you're recognized, sir, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having this hearing today, because this, I'll just say in some cases it's overdue, like so many things, but the bottom line is it's never a bad time to try to do the right thing going forward, and so thank you all for being here. Ms. Robber, can you elaborate on why VA should always obtain the complete service personnel records for every veteran seeking benefits based on military sexual trauma?
Sure. The personnel service record and medical records from service are really the critical piece, really, of most claims, disability compensation claims. But these would be particularly important in the case of military sexual trauma, because oftentimes that personnel record may contain some of the critical markers that VA needs to consider when it's deciding the claim.
Okay, and kind of going down that road a little bit, can you elaborate a little bit on why you support the Improving VA Training for Military Sexual Trauma Claims Act?
Sure, because again, we think that it's really important. I think Representative Kim mentioned that some of that training is only happening once every 5 years. It seems that that training should be happening on a much more regular basis, so examiners and claims processors are up to speed with the most important information, the most sensitive information for treating these claims.
And as we do evaluate all the cases that come before and are filed and reviewing personnel records, and whoever might have a look at that to make a good decision going forward, you used in your testimony the word accreditation. Mm-hmm. In this particular case, in any case, but let's just say this particular case, staying with the subject, who or what entity should be responsible for the accreditation of those entities?
Are you talking about the claims processors?
Whatever, if you're accrediting, because again, I was listening and you used the term accreditation.
Well,
And no matter what it is, I mean, it's going to be one of two entities. It's either going to be the Veterans Administration, if they're going to be accrediting people to review and adjudicate all of those, whatever it happens to be, or evaluate. Can you just put a little meat on the bone of what it means to you about accreditation and who has the responsibility for that?
I would, in terms of the VA claims processors and the examiners, I think that is really a question for VA in terms of who are the right people and what
Well,
are
what I heard you say is VA is responsible for doing that.
and
I'm not trying to be arguing. I'm trying to get a handle on
when
who's
we're
got
talking about accredited, I think we're talking about accredited representatives who might be helping a veteran,
Yeah.
and those folks are accredited by VA.
Yeah, so VA has the responsibility for
Correct.
accrediting and holding accountable those representatives who would be representing those individuals or families.
Absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to make
Yep.
sure and clarify that whose court the ball for validating, when you think about, because those of us who've served in the military here, whether you're flying, you're driving a ship, you're on the ground, whatever it happens to be, we all get if you will, accredited. In the case of in piloting, we get certified every year or two that we can actually fly the airplane and do it right. So that's kind of where I was driving on this accreditation piece, because there's a lot of good folks working in the VA who are trying to do the right thing, and it's important upon who's ever running the Veterans Administration to make sure the accreditation process is airtight for those, families seeking to get help. That's all. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Ms. Robert, you good? Did you want to respond?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Ms. Krisfalusy, how are you doing down there? Don't think you came all the way to Washington, D.C. without some. I'm going to engage with you, okay?
Thank you.
Looks like
Thank
you're
you
getting a
for
little
having
lonely.
me.
So can you elaborate a little bit more? Because the hard date seems to be 1998, but we know that, and as a veteran myself, I don't know if my spouse necessarily wants to be buried with me. That's a discussion she and I need to have together. But I do appreciate and respect the importance of that. Could you just elaborate to the committee?
What I could tell you in our case, which was very unique, because Denny and Lois died together. They're buried in a common grave in Mexico City. I am a resident of Washington County. We're proud of our cemetery. I decided, hey, it's time to honor my brother. It's time to do something to recognize his service, and Lois serving with him, because a military wife, as you know, is what she does. When we went through the process, we were all amazed that her information could not be put on Denny's stone because of the time of the death. And what I could tell you, on the front of my brother's stone, I put beloved son, brother, and uncle. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to make sure that my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, nieces and nephews will know about this uncle, because he died how many years ago? On the back of the stone was to be Lois's information, and I wanted it to say, beloved wife and best friend. When I realized Lois, her name's not going to be there, I did not put husband on the front of the stone. It broke my heart that we were not able to recognize the fact that he was a husband and had a beloved wife. That's why I pursued this process. I was shocked to see that there was a date and that we were not able to do this. And I believe everyone around me was surprised too. We weren't aware of this. However, as I have said, I am forever grateful of all the help that I've received from everyone involved in the situation.
Yes, ma'am, and you will most certainly continue to get it.
I thank you so much.
Colonel, get you a good drink. I'm coming at you. You ready?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So the exam that you were given when your doctor called you, like, hey, you have cancer, and you're stage 4, was that an annual exam, or was there something specific that you went in for? Is this something that the aviators will get while they're on active duty and yours just happened to hit? Or were you in there for something specific and we found it? 'Cause as far as exit strategy goes, I can only speak for myself, but they weren't diving over barrels to get me to go to all these exams before they were like, hey, appreciate you later.
Right. And before I answer, Chairman Luttrell, I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize and thank you and your family's service to our nation. On behalf of my family, thank you. No, my cancer was discovered not during a routine exam, and I will echo your statement that military aviators would rather not see the doctor, because the doctor is one of the few people in the world that can ground them and prevent them from doing the thing that they love, which is fly. And so that's a culture that we'll need to overcome within the military. My cancer was discovered not during a routine exam, but because I was seeing my doctor for another issue. I had some pain in my lower back, is what it was. And I was doing some physical therapy, and they ordered a x-ray. And in the x-ray, a very sharp captain in the Air Force, the technician, noticed a occlusion, as they call it, in my lower left area, and said it could be part of the colon, but we don't know. And so, of course, I was busy with work, and it was 3 months before I came back, did another x-ray, that occlusion was still there, and then after a CT scan, that's how they found the cancer.
So there lies the most important question in the room, is how do you convince a culture? Mm-hmm. My previous career is same mentality. How do you prevent it? How do you convince the culture that this is going to be necessary? Because the last thing after going everything that you and every other pilot has to go through to get in that aircraft is to have somebody who's not a pilot take them away.
Right. I think the culture is already shifting. I've seen it on active duty. We now have dedicated pilot gyms, nutritionists, physical therapists that are helping the pilots address issues in a supportive, health way, and not grounding them as doing so. And that culture is already shifting. So
that's good. It's gonna have to be them that's on board, and
Yes.
we can legislate that all day long. But if they don't want to, you know the deal. I mean, if you're a veteran, you understand exactly what I'm saying. I'll just tell you, hey, we're not going to show up.
Yeah.
And then inevitably, bad things will most certainly happen. But thank you again for your service. Mr. Yocum, sir, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing today, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. I was proud to reintroduce H.R. 647, the Ensuring Veterans Final Resting Place Act at the beginning of the 2025, earlier this year. Under current law, if a veteran family chooses to have the VA furnish a commemorative plaque or urn for their loved one, they may inadvertently forfeit their right to later inter the veteran at a national cemetery. That would require either a headstone or marker at the gravesite. This issue came to my attention because one of my constituents, Mrs. Jerry Simmons, was attempting to get a plaque for her late husband Gary, a Vietnam veteran. While working with the VA to secure Mrs. Simmons a plaque for her late husband, we discovered a problem. Current law forces military families to make a choice between an urn or plaque or internment at a national cemetery, not both. However, a simple choice to temporarily hold the veteran's ashes in a VA urn nullifies the veteran's eligibility to be buried in a national cemetery after honorable service to our great country. We certainly don't want to prevent veterans from being laid to rest in national cemeteries if they wish. This bill would provide much-needed flexibility in difficult end-of-life decisions. The Ensuring Veterans Final Resting Place Act of 2025 would allow a veteran survivor to choose to have their veteran loved one interred in a VA cemetery, even if the survivor initially chose an urn or plaque in lieu of internment at a VA cemetery. We grant veterans the final honor to be interred on solemn grounds at our national cemeteries. But those logistics are left to veterans' families. The death of a family member is always difficult, and seldom do the arrangements go smoothly. Sometimes families don't immediately know if they want to have the remains of their loved one interred at a national cemetery, or they simply may not want to part with the ashes right away. So they may opt for an urn or plaque. This snap decision has permanent consequences as the law is currently written. We must allow the grieving families of Americans' veterans the flexibility to wait to choose whether or not to inter their loved one at a national cemetery. And we shouldn't deny veterans that right simply because their remains were placed in a VA urn. Ms. Witter, is it difficult for families to make an informed decision about whether to place their veteran loved one's remains in a VA-furnished urn or lay them to rest in a VA national cemetery?
Thank you for the question. I appreciate the work the committee has done on this issue. We've worked with the VA and the committee on this. So I think it's really important to remember that the veteran earns funeral and burial benefits, but so does the spouse. They're both entitled to them. And I'm sure the chairman's wife would, in fact, like to be laid to rest with him when the day comes, despite what you think. But I've spoken to a lot of veterans and their spouses, and the overwhelming message I get is, I want to keep my spouse's remains in an urn, and then we'll both be buried together. They're two separate benefits. It's not double dipping. But as it stands at the moment, if you accept the urn benefit and keep your spouse with you for 20 years, then they are now forbidden from being buried, but you could still be buried in the cemetery. I think that's a complicated thing. I think it adds extra stress. And what the VA is doing in that situation is expecting the grieving loved one to make a decision in the moment with long-term consequences. They have to plan a funeral, grieve a loss, work through all of that, and then at the same time they have to figure out their own final disposition. The spouse has to decide, well, do I want to have a ground burial, or do I want to put the veteran and not have them with me? So I think it's unfair, and I think it would be a small mercy for the VA to allow those grieving families to keep their loved one with them.
Thank you. And Ms. Rober, can you elaborate on why you believe Congressman Barrett's bill, H.R. 1039, would ensure that the VA receives the assistance it needs to improve its vast number of notice letters?
Well, I think by having a center with people who have experience in those types of letters or issues, and also having advocates and experts who will be assisting in that process, would sort of continue part of what actually has already started in the last Congress. So we think that is good work that should continue.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Yocum. Thank you for your testimony and joining us today. You're now excused, and we will wait for the third panel to take their seats. Did we have a high school class walk in and join the committee? Where are you guys from? Somebody stand up and with a loud, thunderous voice. Thomas Jefferson. Is that a state? In Virginia. Okay. From what? Science and Technology. Well, welcome to the Committee of Veterans Affairs. Sure, eventually we'll get into science and tech. We're happy to have you. Are you enjoying your day in Washington, D.C.? Yes? Hang out a little bit longer. That may change. Is everyone ready? Ms. Moses, how are you today?
Good morning, sir. I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for joining us today. Thank all the witnesses from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Are we ready to rock and roll? Everybody got a good deep breath and a glass of water? The lead witness for VA is Ms. Kenesha Britton, Assistant Deputy Undersecretary of Field Operations at the Veterans Benefits Administration. Ms. Britton is accompanied by Ms. Moses, Senior Principal Advisor for VBA's Compensation Services. Ms. Lisa, say it one more time. Posbon. Okay, I'm from East Texas. I was going to try to get that out, but Posbon. Got it. All right. Executive Director of Cemetery Operations at the National Cemetery Administrations, and Mr. Evan Dykert. All right, outstanding. Acting Deputy Vice Chairman at the VA Board of Veterans Appeals. I ask that all the witnesses please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record reflect the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Ms. Britton, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to present the department's testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member McGarvey, and other members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting us here today to represent our views on several bills that would affect the Department of Veteran Affairs programs and services. Joining me today are Ms. Jocelyn Moses, Senior Principal Advisor, Compensation Service, Veterans Benefits Administration, Ms. Lisa Posbon, Executive Director, Cemetery Operations, National Cemetery Administration, and Mr. Evan Dykert, Acting Deputy Vice Chairman, Board of Veteran Appeals. While my written testimony details the views on the bills, including areas of concern and support, I would like to highlight several bills in my opening remarks. First, VA fully supports the intent of H.R. 530, the ACES Act. VA would like to work with the committee on edits to the legislation to allow the department greater flexibility and make sure that the bill does not duplicate efforts already undertaken by DOD. VA supports both H.R. 647, the Ensuring Veterans Final Resting Place Act of 2025, and H.R. 1344, the Dennis and Lois Krisfalusy Act. The department would like to discuss a more equitable cost solution for H.R. 647. The department fully supports H.R. 1344 while suggesting amendments to eliminate the date of death limitations to ensure eligibility with minimum estimated costs. VA supports the intent of H.R. 1039, the Clear Communications for Veterans Claims Act, and H.R. 1286, while suggesting amendments to allow VA sufficient time and flexibility to comply with IT and legal requirements. The VA also suggests additional amendments that would allow time to work through the federally funded Research Development Center's recommendations. The department fully supports the Review Every Veterans Claim Act of 2025 that would prevent denials solely based on a veteran's failure to attend a scheduled disability exam. VA would like to expand the bill language, however, to include pension claims and ensure a comprehensive review of all evidence within a claims file. The department fully supports the Review Every Veterans Claim Act of 2025. VA also supports the Improving VA Training for Military Sexual Trauma Claims Act while offering several amendments to avoid duplicate requirements and make sure the bill aligns with existing VA practices. The current training is comprehensive, robust, and efficient, and VA would support amendments to the bill to make sure it improves training requirements. The VA would also support sensitivity training for contracted medical examiners, but recommends modifying the legislative text to reflect the appropriate roles of individuals involved. The department is also supportive of the Survivors Benefits Delivery Improvement Act of 2025 and the Veterans Compensation Cost of Living Adjustments Act of 2025. VA would suggest certain amendments to the Survivors Benefits Delivery Act to improve timely benefits delivery, outreach strategies, and resource alignment for survivors. The VA fully supports the COLA bill in its current form. Finally, VA does not support the Veterans Appeals Transparency Act of 2025 and the Board of Veterans Appeals Attorney Retention and Reduction Backlog Act. The Veterans Appeals Transparency Act would impose serious administrative burdens on the board while also causing major confusion and misperceptions among veterans. The Attorney Retention and Backlog Reduction Act conflicts with the specific classification regulations, lacks clarity on improving decision quality and processing speed, and could seriously impact the board's operations and budget. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. We appreciate the congressional intent and welcome the opportunity to work closely with Congress on all the bills on today's agenda. My colleagues and I are prepared to respond to any questions you or members of the subcommittee may have. I would be remiss if I did not thank all of the veterans, dependents, caregivers, survivors, and others here today advocating for veterans and their families. Again, thank you.
Thank you. The written statement of Ms. Britton will be entered into the hearing record. We'll now move to questions. I recognize the ranking member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dykert, is that correct? Thank you. As I understand it, the Board of Veterans Appeals has stopped or is planning to stop its program to reimburse attorneys for bar dues. Look, this is one of those things. I mean, I know I was an attorney in Kentucky. You have to pay bar dues to be a lawyer. That's part of it. And it's a couple $100 for about $300 in Kentucky to be a licensed attorney. But you know, this is one of those things that could be a morale killer at the VA. And so can you confirm for me, has the Board of Veterans Appeals terminated this benefit for its attorneys, or does it have plans to? And if yes, why?
Thank you, Ranking Member McGarvey. At this point, I can't say that any final action has been taken on it. I can tell you that it is something that has been discussed. To this point, our primary focus is on making sure that our budget is as robust as possible to continue employing as many attorneys and staff as we can to do the mission of the board.
I appreciate that. You used a lot of buzzwords there, though. So I'm just going to ask you in pretty simple Kentucky terms. Is this something you're planning on doing?
I would assume so.
Okay. I think in Washington, that's as close as you can get to a yes. Why?
Again, sir, in looking at our budget projections for this year, looking down the line, in terms of anything that we can do to prioritize keeping the highest number of attorneys, staff, and judges to continue working this down, that is what we want to do.
Yeah, and I'm not asking this question for the attorneys who work at BVA. I'm asking this for the people they serve, the veterans. We know there's a 2-year backlog. We know that there is a problem right now with retention and recruitment. We know that the only way to get rid of this backlog is to go through it. The pile's not going to get smaller unless we are intentional about getting through these claims so our veterans can get the care they can deserve. And I think things we're doing like this, we're not allowing for promotion on one hand, we're taking things away on the other hand. This is how you kill morale in an institution. And who gets hurt are the veterans. That's what we're trying to get to here. Did anybody consider how this might impact morale? Especially, since you're already forcing these board attorneys to stop teleworking, to come back to an office that doesn't even have space for everybody. I heard today from Ms. Britton potentially opposing allowing another level for attorneys, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. Have you guys thought about the impact this would have on the people who work there? And then again, on the veterans. That's where this ultimately goes.
Respectfully, Ranking Member McGarvey, there are a couple things that I would want to push back on a little bit. In terms of our overall retention, our statistics have shown that since 2018, our overall attrition rate has dropped from 13.9% to 7.7%. And looking specifically at GS-14 attorneys, the highest level that you can ascend without being a supervisor at this point, that is even lower than 4%. This year, since...
What you're telling me is, again, this is Washington speak, you're losing people and you can't afford to. And you're taking things away from why you're losing people. So we agree on that.
We are losing people, but
we agree on that. So I bring this up because we were making some progress. We actually were making some progress. But you mentioned in your testimony that this is now at risk. The progress is now at risk. So we should be working hard to secure the progress, to get those numbers even lower, not doing things that are actually going to undo it. And it seems that what we're doing. So at the very least, let's promote our good employees to match their peers at other agencies. Let's take care of our employees, because these employees, the reason to take care of them is not just to take care of employees, is to take care of our veterans. And we can talk about all the recruitment and retention statistics, they're not good enough. And recognize that the people being hurt are the people who put on the uniform, and we've made a promise to that I don't think we are doing a good enough job honoring. So I appreciate you all being here today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGarvey. Mr. Self, sir, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Dykert, I've got a series of fairly simple questions, yes or no, hopefully.
Yes, sir.
On average, how many years, the first one's real simple, do veterans wait for a VA Board of Veterans Appeals decision on an appeal in the board's AMA direct review docket, the direct review docket?
If you'll allow me to consult my notes, sir. Currently, as of March 23rd, direct review was 1.5 years.
That's what I thought. So does VA still send veterans notice of appeal rights, which tells them that the board on average issues a decision within 1 year of appeals on the direct review docket?
So, Congressman Self, I believe that you're speaking specifically about the notice of appeal rights that would accompany a rating decision?
Correct.
I believe that it says that we have a goal of 365 days, sir.
A goal?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what the average is?
So right now, for veteran and dependent cases, for live veteran and dependent, our average days pending is 329 days.
Okay. Then, is it true that the law requires the Board of Veterans Appeals to issue decisions in docket order?
Yes, it is, sir.
Yes or no? Is it true that many veterans have been waiting since 2019 for a decision on their appeal?
I will say yes, sir.
Do you believe that veterans deserve transparency from the board? This is a real simple rhetorical question almost, so that they can make informed decisions on how to pursue their very own claims.
Yes, we do, Congressman Self.
This is exactly why I filed the transparency bill. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Self. Mr. Pfluger, sir, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank everybody here. Thank you for your service. It may seem that I'm going to ask some hard questions, but it's only to actually help those that I've served with, those that you're already helping, and to do it in a way that is targeted, to use a pilot term, that will prevent and will continue to find the reasons. So as I mentioned, I think y'all were here for the previous questions. We have peer-reviewed studies. DOD has done these. We know that there are correlative factors between certain types of cancer, flying. You heard my good friend Pablo testifying. Now it's time to pivot to the what. It is time to pivot to what is causing this? Why is this happening? When you sit in a cockpit that has a giant radar that is filled with electronics, that is exposed to the sun, there's so many different factors, and there's a lot of work already being done. So, Ms. Britton, again, thank you. Currently today, I'll just start with the simple question of, with the PACT Act, if a veteran aviator is diagnosed with cancer after he or she leaves the service, is that condition automatically presumptive under the PACT Act?
Thank you for that question, sir. I will defer to Ms. Moses to provide a detailed answer.
So thank you very much for that question. So in regards to whether or not the condition would be presumptive, it definitely would depend on which specific condition was diagnosed. Happy to take that back for specifics to answer your question.
I think I'll just go ahead and throw a guess out here that it's not. And that's the problem that I think we're trying to address here, is that we now know through 3 studies that are peer-reviewed that there is a linkage between flying. Healthy individuals who are literally the most physically fit people, they've been picked out of the society because they are physically fit. We had to go through enormous amounts of medical examinations in order to fly. No, we don't want to go to the doctor, but we were, we had to undergo lots of tests, and the cancer rates, just for the three that I mentioned, are 24 to 30% higher in this population of very healthy people than the normal civilian population. So, Ms. Britton, you mentioned in your oral testimony that you want to work with the committee. What edits do you see right now that we're proposing in ACEs that the VA wants to suggest?
Sir, we don't have any specific edits at the time. What we are doing is still working to understand the studies that DOD is conducting, but I will defer to Ms. Moses to add further.
Thank you so much, Ms. Britton. We don't want to limit the conditions to the 11 conditions that are listed. We want to make sure that we are comprehensive. We understand that there are also existing research studies underway. We would like to leverage the data that is existing to identify what additional ways that we can identify causal factors.
And I'll just push back just a little bit on that, because why wouldn't we go with what the National Academy of Science is already recommending? They know that these 11 are correlative. So let's hone in on that as a starting point and go from there. Why are we waiting? Because, and I'll ask this, can you explain how waiting years for the DoD studies to finish out serves veterans now? Because we're in kind of crisis mode right now.
Sure. Thank you very much for that question. And if you allow me to clarify, we're not stating that we're in objection to the 11 conditions. We just don't want to restrict to those 11. So we do support, we're in agreement with the 11, but we want to make sure that we're not restricting or limiting to those 11 conditions.
Do you agree, or Ms. Britton, do you agree that moving with an extreme sense of urgency right now is the right course of action?
Yes, sir, we do agree.
Is VA committed to moving with that extreme sense of urgency right now to help Pablo, to help? This could be me. I mean, literally, we're talking about people. This could be Mr. Bergman, who's a pilot, the general.
We are 100% committed to resolving this, sir, in the most timely manner as possible.
And will y'all commit today to briefing the secretary, who also is an Air Force veteran, by the way, on this issue, on the ACEs Act, on the need for ACEs Act to move with extreme urgency?
Certainly, sir. We are always excited to brief the secretary on these type of issues.
Thank you. Again, thank you for what you do. The questions, although direct, are built upon some frustration that I have over the last 3 years, because it's 3 to 4 years we've been working on this. And in that 3 to 4 year period, both Pablo and myself know many people who have been diagnosed now in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, which is, the rates are just extremely high. The data points to a need for ACEs Act. We have a bicameral, bipartisan piece of legislation, ACEs Act. Senator Mark Kelly, Mr. Tom Cotton, myself, and many others in the House and the Senate want to see this go. We're counting on you. Thank you for the work that you do to help so many veterans. I mean that sincerely. And Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for allowing me to wave onto this committee for such an important issue. This is my top priority.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Absolute honor to have you, and we're going to carry this for you all the way to the finish line. Ms. Britton, I'm going to put this at you, but I got a feeling you're going to deflect over Mr. Dykert, the Veterans Appeals Transparency Act.
Your feeling is correct, sir.
Aha!
We'll defer.
It's going to be a good day in Washington, D.C. Tell me why it's a no-go. And before you start on that, can you give me an idea on the overall, on the dockets? How many outstanding claims are currently in place?
Respectfully, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the dockets, I don't have that in front of me, but that's something I'm happy to take back to the record and report back to you on, sir.
Do you have a plus or minus somewhere? Because I got a feeling it's like in the hundreds of thousands.
So I believe the last statistics I saw 197,000, if I'm remembering correctly, from our report on Monday.
Okay, and that's from a report from Monday.
Yes, sir.
All right, now I'm going to let you dig in a little bit on this. Why the VA is shooting this down?
Sir, we have three primary concerns as it comes to this bill as written. We definitely share this committee's desire to increase transparency as it comes to veterans' appeals. But those three concerns that we've got are, number one, when we've done this in the past, we've opened ourselves up to litigation at the Veterans Court. When you're listing out, these are the docket dates that we're doing, if you're a person who sees, well, looks like this range and I'm not part of that, you're going to get concerned. And when you get concerned, the place that you go is to the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims to file a writ to say, what are these people doing? We had to spend a lot of time working with our fellow counsel at General Counsel to say, well, this is what happened in this particular case, and here's why we couldn't move that. And even if we had a lot of good reasons that that particular case couldn't move, it took up a lot of time on our part to prepare those declarations.
That sounds, okay. Something tells me this goes through many lawyers' hands before you put it in front of Congress.
Well,
I'm not going to
yes.
say that's a problem. So there's risk aversion in here.
Yes, yes, sir.
Wholeheartedly, 100%.
Yes.
Okay, that doesn't fix the problem.
No,
I
sir.
understand the defensive posture that they're taking for the VA. I got it. It's not solving the problem.
So, I mean, to put everything aside,
Absolutely, lay it out.
the biggest thing that I would say, Chairman Luttrell, is that knowing that information isn't going to help a veteran look at his or her claim and say, this is the best path for me.
The one thing I would argue against, are you a veteran, sir? I apologize.
No, sir.
Okay, the one thing that I would argue, and this transcends the veteran community, but the one thing that we really, really like is being informed.
Yes, sir.
From step off to mission success, the more information we have, I say this every committee. You know, the veteran community, boy, we hard to handle. You know, we get spun up and down quickly. And one of the reasons we do that is if we have not been given the information that we want, need, and is important. Okay? Continue.
We feel that the more important information that we can provide, sir, are those statistics regarding average days pending, average days to complete. That if you can look at that and know this is going to take this long, this is going to take this long, I feel like this is the better path for me to go on the direct docket because I want an answer as quickly as I can. Or I want to go on the evidence docket because I've got something else to submit, but I also want to make sure that I can take that to the board rather than back to VA in the regional office.
This is going to keep VA in its current position, correct? By shooting, since the VA disagrees on this piece of legislation, that's going to keep the posture the same in the VA.
Certainly, we're willing to continue to work with the committee. Yeah, it would not change.
I think I would have been happier if it would have said amendments, where VA will provide amendments instead of saying the VA just does not support. Because you just immediately said no, and said let's figure out how to get to yes. And
I appreciate that, sir.
okay. I'm not giving up on this little guy right here, so this is going to be some discussions that we're going to continue to have. And I would recommend that the VA, lawyers included, figure out, again, how are we going to get to yes instead of no? Because at the end of the day, he and I and the other members, we got to have to go home and talk to our veterans. All right? So since we have to do that, guess who you have to talk to? You got to talk to us.
Yes, sir.
All right? And then I had something for Ms. Moses, but do you have anything else for second round of the question and answer? Okay, so thank you to all the witnesses for testifying today. Let me close with this. You guys are, I really respect and admire you guys for working with the VA. It's not an easy task. It is a big machine that is very, very complex. And those of us that you have to deal with, again, aren't easy to deal with. Please continue to do what you do. And just understand that even if you're going to sit up in front of this committee, me as the chair and the ranking member, I'm going to wire brush you if it's necessary, okay? Because it's not a perfect space. And we will absolutely die trying to get us there, okay? Because the veterans deserve that right. And I'll pass it off to ranking member for your closing remarks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with that. And look, too many times, I think the VA comes in front of us and says no instead of trying to get to yes. And why that's a problem is it's because our veterans who are feeling the consequences of it. And we've got to make sure we are busting through the status quo to do everything we can to help our veterans. And regardless of what you might see in Washington right now, I think this committee remains committed to that mission. So appreciate that.
I ask unanimous consent that the statements for the record we have received be entered into the hearing record. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I thank the members and the witnesses for their attendance and participation today. This hearing is adjourned. And one more thing for the panel. And as a Navy guy, I don't ever like to give Marines credit for anything just because it's a Navy Marine thing. But I always, when I'm up here, being in combat, I was always impressed with Marines always went. Like, hey, look, we're not gonna make it back, we're going. That's the mentality of a Marine. And our service members across the board. But again, I throw this at the Marines because I can't tell you how many times Marines saved my life. And I was a special forces operator, and so it's really even bad since I'm a Navy guy, special forces guy. But I sit up every day when we're in here thinking like, hey, look, man, every service member said, I will go. Now, I'm not saying that you don't, but every single day, remember that every single veteran you got to deal with at one time or another said, hey, look, I'm going. I'm going to provide that blanket of freedom that we sleep under every single night. I'm that man or woman, all right? And I know, boy, they're hard to get a hold of. God, I mean, sometimes I talk to my veteran, I'm like, yo, you are just out of control. But they've earned that right because they put on the uniform and protected us while we sat back here in the United States, okay? Fair enough, that's supposed to be off the record. I should have said that, but thank you very much.